Hello, my name is Cornell Green, and I am the Failure Guy. Welcome to the podcast. On this episode of the Failure Guy podcast, my guest is Kahshanna Evans of Kissing Lions Public Relations. Kahshanna, thank you for joining us, and welcome to the conversation.
Hi, Cornell.
Hello. So it is good to talk with you again. It has been a while. It's probably been a little more than a month, or maybe more than a month since last we spoke. So glad that you could join me. And so first of all, how are you? How have you been since last we met each other in real life, IRL, as the kids say these days?
Yeah, please forgive me for such a silly opening. You know, it's
No.
it's been such amazing weather. We're in a completely new season, so I'm at an all-time high so far as optimism.
Yes,
And
yes.
excited to be here. We started talking a little more about, why is this failure stuff so good? So really, really
Yes.
glad that that really like hooked me in. So really looking forward to this discussion today.
Yes, this is going to be pretty fascinating. And one of the things I'd like to mention before we get started is I noticed I sent you an email one weekend, and you have a responder that says, you know what, it's a weekend. I have downtime and decompression. I'll catch you. And I was like, that is, I might note to self. That's no, really, especially as entrepreneurs, because my joke, especially when my 11-year-old grandnephew calls me, and he if he had his druthers, we'd still be on the phone call from last night. So I kind of says, what I'm about to say is like, yeah, every day's a work day. You got to go to work. And I do work 7 days a week in varying levels. This is a Saturday as we're making this recording. But nurturing oneself, one's mental and emotional health is a very important and honestly, a message appropriate. I sometimes fail to properly manage myself. Putting myself into the grindstone. And I have a saying. I say we grind the flour to make the dough. We don't grind ourselves into dust. That's not what getting our grind on is about. And I have to be mindful of that. So I found that very enlightening. And it's like, that's, to put it out there and to put it in the message and saying, I got your message, but you know what? I don't do this on the weekend. Okay, this is me time. I'll see you Monday. And I was like, yeah, I dig that. So I always like to have my guests introduce themselves because I might know them, but the viewers and listeners do not. So, Kahshanna, tell us about yourself, your background, and what brings you here to the Failure Guy podcast.
Amazing. Hello to the audience watching. I am zooming in from New York City. I am the founder of Kissing Lions Public Relations. And Kissing Lions Public Relations is coined fierce yet lovable media. So, what does that mean? It means that I'm working with niche or emerging brands on any number of initiatives that include branding, marketing communications, and also public relations strategy. I am in New York City and have been for longer than I can count on both hands. I'm originally from Southern California,
Ah,
and I also have a background in wellness and also have just wrapped up an incredible year working at a nonprofit that educates on trauma-informed awareness and resilience building. So I'm definitely looking forward to dipping into the discussion today with the failure guy. I mean, I feel like the most intriguing thing that we touched on, I almost didn't know there was a Cornell out there. You have a very specific perspective, you're very entrepreneurial. And when I think about multi-hyphenates, they really have a lot of those qualities that, I encountered when I first met you. Open, flexible, conversational. You can talk about, any number of topics. And there's something of a visionary that is intriguing. I'm like, okay, this is the failure guy. The failure guy seems like pretty personable. So, head scratcher. I need to get to the bottom of that.
well, that no, that's interesting. Obviously, I don't look at myself from the outside. All about my guests and what's coming in. So it's kind of interesting hearing you say that. I've never really reflected on what do people hear when they hear the failure guy. How does that strike them? Of course, for me, I have failure be an acronym that stands for First Attempts in Learning Using Real Experience. And why I've started this podcast is that I want to demystify and destigmatize the concept of failure. Because, as you know, and as we're about to get into in our discussion, failure is part of the process. I always use the example of a child learning to walk. Every attempt is failure until they start walking. But they don't give up. Okay, so I'm learning these leg things. Oh, I can stand up on them. Huh, kind of cool. And I always find it fascinating that infants learn to dance before they learn to walk. They get that bounce. Oh, that's my jam. Yeah, there we go. And
That's
and then they
right.
take their first haltering steps, and sometimes they stumble and fumble and fall, and yet they just keep persisting. I like to say that they even though they're shorter than the grown-up people, they look kind of down at us like, okay, wait a minute, if these clowns can walk, I can get this done. Come on, they ain't got nothing on me. And
Right,
then the
exactly.
next thing you know, they go from crawl to run, and then you got to baby-proof everything and practically put a harness on them. It's like, where'd they go? Pew! You know, little zip worms or whatever have you. But I say that if children looked at and regarded failure the way adults do, we would all still be crawling on our hands and knees. You know, and I
It's very
love looking,
possible.
yeah, and I love looking at infants, especially toddlers, when they're at that stage where everything is fascinating because everything is new and they have no problems not knowing because they don't know anything. So everything's a new discovery. Every site's a new thing. Every person's a new encounter and experience. And I sometimes wonder, when did we lose that? At what point in our development do we fall away from that and get into this? Oh, I don't want to take a chance because I might. Yeah, so what? You might fail. And
And it can be really, really confronting. You know, failure, the word is so big. It's like almost, I feel like my experiences with failure, I've had to sneak up on what you're saying, which is, I know what you're saying is accurate, but I had to, okay, what if I soften it and take like a half of a baby step towards knowing that that was the next key or the next puzzle piece to where I'm going.
okay,
So it does take a really conscious mindset to just kind of pivot and just keep that slow recognition that failure does not mean bad. It doesn't mean
right,
exclusion or what you're subconsciously,
right.
associating it with. It just means that part of your learning just wrapped up. It's time to focus on the next part of the learning that's going to take you where your dreams and goals are.
Right, right. Well, I love that you had to sneak up on it. Even though intellectually you understood. I mean, you could say, well, okay, that makes sense. I could read that off of a page, but I guess it's what the emotional, the psychological absorption of it that we can't just take it all in one bite. What do you think that is?
You know, um, I just attended this incredible retreat through the Acosta Institute, and we talked and unpacked this concept that Angel Acosta was referring to as creating space. And so his theories and philosophies that obviously he's learned from a vast body of knowledge, right?
Yes,
But
yes, of
the
course.
idea was that we're utilizing this perspective of creating space through the recognition that there's space within ourselves, there's space between ourselves and other people, and then there is space between us and the environment we're in. And ever since that retreat, that was a burnout retreat for leaders.
Oh,
He's
okay,
fantastic. Yes, he's fantastic. So I won't chalk him up anymore, but definitely has a very fascinating perspective on failure.
okay.
Um, so it was this concept of creating space is my most recent aha moment with, oh no, I messed up. Like being late, for example. Being late in
Yeah.
a Eurocentric society is like,
Yes.
oh my gosh, they're gonna be there with like the frontliners and they're gonna be armed because that 10 minutes just changed the universe, right? And so
Yes.
um there's this unfortunate distraction on small things that become aggrandized failures in our mind because we are in the structure we're in.
Right.
So I really think this notion that it just was, it's like I knew, but I needed to be reminded, and I needed this specific perspective, create space so that, okay, well, let's reflect on it. Was that failure good or bad?
Right.
And when you reflect on it, does it sting a little bit less? Is it a little less uncomfortable? And then when you give yourself even more space to maybe sleep on it and maybe look up some articles, what have other leaders done? Or listen to some podcasts. What have other leaders talked about?
Right. Right.
When you do that, you've successfully created space. Now you can leave it up to yourself. Was failure good or bad? You might not even want a binary. You may just
Right.
have grown towards where you're going. So we don't always have to name it, but
Right.
sometimes it's also very good to name.
Right. And when you ask that question, does it sting? You bring up, and this thought literally just came to mind in listening to you share. I think what I'm trying, and I this is why I love these conversations, because I have new discoveries. Even though I've been doing this podcast off and on since 2019, I'm still learning what the heck it is. And the question came to my mind: when we regard failures personally, are we in a space of judgment or evaluation? Because if we're judging ourselves based on performance, then that's why it would sting. When you ask, does it sting? It's like, well, why does it even have to sting? Well, if we're judging ourselves, good or bad, right or wrong, success or failure, in that sort of binary, and I like how you summed it up, and it doesn't even have to be a binary evaluation. Whereas we say, because I worked with a group, a well-known personal training called Landmark Education, a sort of I'd say the grandchild of EST training, EST, Earhart seminar training. And one of the things that they say about failure is that failure is just an opportunity to assess your performance. You've heard the saying, perhaps, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, and if you're participating in any sport, how do you know how to improve yourself? You've got to get out on the court, get out on the field, and do it. And then you look and say, okay, if, for example, I like to use the example of Shaquille O'Neal. Back in his prime, there was a offensive technique called hack-a-shack, where they would deliberately foul him because he was absolutely lousy at free throws. In fact, there was one game he made 1 out of 12 attempts. But what that ultimately did for him is it made him realize during that offseason that he had to step up his free throw game. He couldn't just dominate and drive to the post and slam dunk it in and break backboards, because they figured a tactic to counter that. It's like, we're going to hit you with the thing that you are absolutely miserable at. And so it's like, and now he's never going to be anyone's free throw champion, but he's so significantly improved in that offseason that they stopped, trying that thing. So I think there's a tendency, socially and personally, I think we're kind of culturally trained this way to judge ourselves, and kind of harshly. And I think that's the thing I'm trying to get away from with the Failure Guy podcast.
Absolutely. And what I will say is it's not we're not a monolith. The way we're approaching growth, the way that we're approaching personal development, the way we're approaching failure. So I think the idea here is just to recognize when you're on one chapter that may seem very work focused or focused, you will need to assess, you will need information. But if you're on a sort of personal journey as well, once you kind of toggle that one section down, you can kind of pivot your attention and think to yourself, yeah, this makes me feel bad. And it's ideal to have supportive tools in place, like maybe you're a meditator, maybe you're a person that does all the sort of new age breath work, or you're going to your coaches or your faith leaders. The idea here is to understand what it's anchored to. So, right, like when I studied wellness, it was not just about a situation that we're currently experiencing, but it's always anchored to something that helped us to develop the belief system. So if it's developed at, oh my gosh, when I was in first grade, I had this special project and the teacher tore it up because it was so terrible. Now I'm in this moment judging myself that I'm going to re-experience that same terror.
Yes, yes.
And so there shouldn't be stigma to this. This is fascinating. It's typical of human personalities. And there's no shame to discovering, oh, well, I was approaching it like if I failed, I couldn't get back up and do what I love. But once you kind of retrieve whatever that insight is, you can toggle between the two. I'm assessing myself. I'm enjoying that this is not judgment. This is just something for business, right?
Right.
So we can categorize from there, I think.
Right, right. Okay, well, that kind of segues us into, our discussion business. Now, you work with businesses, and would it be correct to say that you tend to work with smaller scale businesses? I'm sure you work with businesses of all sizes, but you work with a number of small businesses, startups, entrepreneurial endeavors. And so, what has your experience been in terms of dealing with these businesses from a consultation sort of perspective, in terms of dealing with failure and the experience of failure?
Ooh, this is power packed. So, for the audience here, as a reminder, my background is communications, public relations, and branding. So, I do work with entrepreneurs, niche subject matter experts, nascent brands, and these are all folks with something really special that I refer to as they've got a newsworthy story to tell, right? So the failures in that are really interesting. A few come to mind. One failure comes to mind when we are entering a new season of our business and we fail to kind of manage our expectations. Because there's something wonderfully distracting that happens that if we learn, that's why it's wonderful. We're constantly comparing our business to that business next door. We want to be as special as them. Oh my goodness, we
Okay.
saw that they were in the local news. And it's a little difficult for a lot of people in business not to see that as a failure and then to use their superpowers in a way that is not helpful for getting
Right.
across the finish line of their goal. So if it's like, but look what he did, and he said he did it in 6 months. Sure. So number one, that doesn't mean that person did it in 6 months. And number two, sometimes it takes 10 whole years to be an overnight success,
Yes, yes.
20 whole years, 30 whole years to kind of hit your flow state. So it's easy to compare, but it's a trap. So it's a thief of joy and it is
Yes.
perceived as a failure. So I kind of, my approach to the strategies I apply in Kissing Lions public relations is that there's a little more fluidity. So it's more like alchemy. It's not like just linear goals. Sometimes people
Right.
say, okay, this is exactly what we're doing. This is exactly what I want. And they don't realize like what we're really doing is a high level collaboration, right? And that is just a part of business that, we want to keep in mind. So managing expectations is one. And then the other failure is, you know, feeling like you're close to something and stopping. You've worked on it for 9 months. You've worked on it for a month, a year and a month. And it's like, it's around the corner. It's happening. You're ready to push the publish button on the big, amazing website, website, a new video and new promotions and all of these fun things. And then you just, whatever it is, if you have those kind of old hooks or those old doubts hanging around, the wounds from the old failures and not the wisdom, it could kind of be like, ooh, I'm close and I'm going to pull it back. And I'm going to be very creative and make that illusion seem more realistic than
Wow.
I'm just terrified that success is well earned, but it will lead me to more painful circumstances because, in some kind of capacity, I'm going to have to start all over again. I'm going to have to live up to this new, bar of performance.
Right.
So, those are two areas that I feel failure is waiting to make
Right.
people feel as if they can't reinvent themselves or they can't, what you're really here to do, especially in communications, marketing, you're here to A/B test. And there's no B if you can't kind of look at the pros and the cons of what happened after A, even if you never want to say the F word, which is failure.
From A to B to F.
Exactly. Or like from A to F to B to yes, is really
Okay.
what we're hoping
I
for.
love it. I love it.
Rinse, repeat.
Yes. Well, so a phrase that jumped out at me as you were just speaking is the wounds versus the wisdom. I find that particularly insightful. That's one of those takeaway phrases for me because as and I've experienced it myself. I think everybody has is you get triggered by something that could be in the deep past, and that can flummox you, that can sideswipe you from your goal, and it's rather than pick the scab of the wound, if we can look at the takeaway from that and derive the wisdom from it rather than getting stuck in repeating an emotional trauma or whatever you will. That's just an interesting perspective, an interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, now that we've had this conversation, I'm really curious about what failure will mean once we have this
Mm,
discussion about process, because there is a process in that A/B test.
right,
And I'll just give a specific in terms of what I do. So, we have an approach and we try this for the first 2 months with a new client who has
right.
a very specific set of goals in mind. That's the A. And then comes the, well, we don't like it, or we didn't have time to do these things. We're noticing it doesn't really work well with us in this way. So after that A, there is this incredible kind of dip. And some people are great living in the gap between the A and the B, the A/B test, when they're
Ah,
sort of saying, yeah, we've done this before. We're not afraid to try new things. Now let's do this next. Um, and I feel like one of the biggest gifts, and I know this is going to sound like, okay, is she being wordy here? One of the biggest gifts is not knowing that we are not allowing ourselves to fail and rediscovering, because there's something specific that happens at the very moment we are discovering. We're in the middle of a very specific project. It's a very specific set of stakes. There's goals in place. So when we are in that moment of recognition, I think that things really get good from there, because almost when you're in motion, you don't have time to feel bad. You just want what you want. You want to stay thrilled. You're connected to the dream, the goal. So I think to me, that's something pretty exciting. But, all this flowery discussions about failure aside, because I can be quite an optimist, I can also be a pessimist, and I hate failing.
oh
I'm
yeah, I
honest. I'm not some failure guru. I'm like, I fail all the time. And then I hide it from myself. I'm like, you didn't exactly fail. And it's like, "Ah,
yeah,
you
girl, no,
failed."
you failed. Just
It was
yeah,
like, knees scuffed up,
knuckles bruised.
knuckles bruised. Listen, one of the worst failures that I recall that was so humiliating. In the seventh grade, we had a thing at our junior high school called the turkey trot. And the turkey trot went like all through the neighborhoods. It happened on a Saturday. It was like a big kid parent event, a big school event. So I started running at the turkey trot, and there were so many people clustered that I tripped and fell. And I was
Oh,
so humiliated. I never finished the race.
oh no,
Ah,
oh no.
but the turkey trot lives on, in that I hated long distance running to begin with. I was always a sprinter after that.
Oh,
Right. So that helped me to lean into my strengths. I don't do well with like clusters of folks. I mean, at the time I was, you're at a very vulnerable time as a
yeah.
kid and you're lanky. I was very long. So it
Yes, yes, yes.
wasn't a
Plus,
great
the emotions
combination.
are all dialed up to 11. Let's be
The
honest.
emotions are dialed up. I'm like, will I win? I'm probably not going to win. Slow mo.
yes,
So,
yes. It's
but
funny. No, go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say, but what it really teaches is that it's okay to fall and it's okay to do whatever you do. Like we might be compelled to say, what if you get up now? I have the wisdom I need from that. So back to the point we were discussing, which is, do you have the wound from that or do you have the wisdom? I have both, but I do actively use that wisdom and I'm acknowledging where there may be some vulnerability.
Right, right. It's funny that middle school, junior high school. I have a similar thing that's kind of languished with me for longer than I wish that it had. I was always the top kid in my grade throughout elementary school and up until middle school. And so coming into the ninth grade, which was senior year in junior high school or middle school, it was just a lock that I was going to be valedictorian. I mean, of course. And I was passing by the school office one day, and I heard them talking about another kid don't even remember his name after all of these years, who was potentially in the running for being valedictorian. And that so shook me because it never occurred to me that anyone was even in the running. And so I ended up graduating third in my class. Didn't even
Oh
make
my,
salutatorian. And then I stayed in touch with my junior high school after I went to high school. And talking to the folks in the office, said, "Well, Cornell, we don't understand what had happened to you in that last semester because you were like a solid lock for valedictorian. And then the last semester, it was like you just stopped trying." So that is a reminder to me going forward. Like you say, the wound was for years, for decades. It was like, well, there you go, Cornell. You're going to do like you always do. You're going to get to the 99-yard line and you're going to fumble the ball. And then I realized, you say, from the wound to the wisdom, it's like, no. What I'm never going to do is I'm not going to quit on myself. I have a saying. I like to use, words and phrases and rhymes and alliteration. I say, to beat me, you've got to defeat me. But I am never going to give up before it's over. Never again.
great. And it's, I don't really, again, like I said, I don't like the long distance jogging thing. I'm like, no, I'm good. I don't like races. I don't like, but
I run my mouth. That's about it. I don't understand running at all, especially with these 63-year-old needs. It's like, yeah, the buses. There's like, there's another one coming in 10 minutes. Yeah, nah.
yeah, but I do appreciate what you shared. You're right. It really is when we have that space to evaluate, and hopefully when we say space, what I gather from that, right? Like my interpretation is not only the space, but safe people to process with, coaches we care about, business personas we look up to. That's such a big part of it. I mean, we're in an individualistic society, but a lot of us are collectivist by nature. We're in collectivist cultures within
Yes.
this societal structure. So having people to process with, I think this podcast is a perfect example. So people can say, what does the failure guy say about this? Or let me send an anonymous question.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
so
hope. I hope. Are you listening out there, folks?
hello.
Well, we're talking about the past, so let me ask you something. If you now could go back to a younger you and give yourself advice, what do you think? What points of wisdom would you like to share with your earlier self, say the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey?
I would say to be radically eccentric. Lean all the way into it. Your differentiators, the things that make you unique that you need to discover, are not going to happen when you are mimicking everyone else all the time. You can be a hybrid in different spaces because that's what we have to do in these business structures.
Yes.
But to be radically eccentric, to be eccentric enough to know, okay, if I try to do it their way, here's what I've produced and it's not interesting.
Right.
But here's what happened when I did it my way. I got up at 3 in the morning. I put on jazz music. I had hot chocolate. And I put on my favorite, nature sounds. And then I knocked out 3 times the amount of things in a way that makes me feel proud of the work.
Okay. Okay.
So, that to me is what's kind of top of mind.
Well, that is, first of all, thank you for sharing that, and especially for those listening. And I suppose this is still in my heart, the target audience of this podcast. I envision being entrepreneurs at the beginning of their entrepreneurial journey, what I call accidental entrepreneurs. I started my entrepreneurial journey in 2010 because my last full-time job, which I loved, disappeared because of the subprime mortgage meltdown. I was IT manager for a private architectural design firm, and as we know, in 2008, the global real estate market crashed. So, after a year and laying off 12 architects, they finally had to let me go. And I shot my resume around, figuring, we'll make the six figures. I'll take it as a little cut. But they wanted me to do 4 job titles for 80% of one salary. And when the fourth job offer came in that was like that, I was like, oh no, 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 no. The only person I can work that hard for is myself. You know. But and I totally lost my where I was going with this. No, no, no. When we start in our journey, there is a tendency to think that what we have to do is look at the exemplars of how it's been done and be like that. So for you to share that what you would have shared with yourself is, and I love this term, radical eccentricity. And I like that you clarified. It's like, don't be a wingnut weirdo, because then nobody knows how to interface with you or can even grasp what your process is. But don't feel like you got to be cookie cutter, carbon copy, rubber stamp. Find your unique individuality, especially in a field like yours, public relations. If you don't stand out, how are you going to convince a potential client that you can get them to stand out?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I also like, this kind of approach that we're considering through this conversation, what these very specific types of entrepreneur, like the accidental entrepreneur, to be more specific, what are they supposed to kind of keep in mind or think? The reason I think that acknowledging creative process and having the eccentricities live in all the things that are not just the technical parts of what you have to produce, that to me also is not just to give yourself the freedom, but the other reward of that is that you have this kind of sense of joy where work doesn't feel like joy. And a lot of entrepreneurs, like you're saying, you're not going to work harder for, these other folks than you
Right.
are for yourself. But that also the accidental entrepreneur gets to be joyful. They get to also have a joy practice on top of just the regular approach to that radical eccentricity in their creative processes or their developmental processes or in the ways that they want to like grow their business. So I think that that's something really important for the audience because when failure or the thought of failure hijacks us, I don't believe we experience as much joy, whether we are working as an employee or whether we are working for ourselves. So I like that there's a bit of a double helix here in that failure can either have a process and a cycle it lives in so that we can finish, get to the B test, process and get to the B
Yes.
test, or it can hijack our joy. And then it doesn't matter if we're an accidental entrepreneur or if we're working for someone else. Those ways that that kind of process can stagnate us will potentially make us perform less or be less appealing to our clients. Just a whole mountain of snafus to think about when it comes to
Yes.
what failure can make us feel if we give ourselves space to process it, and what we will feel if we successfully process it and have some space for joy.
Yes. Yes. Well, I thank you for sharing that. This brings me to mind a couple of years ago now. I took on a project, a web development project, and I underbid it, and it was a project that I never should have tried to take on by myself. It was just way beyond the scope of the sort of thing that I do. I mean, I can develop very complex web platforms, but mostly for solopreneurs or very small businesses. And this was a sports-based, athletic program with half a dozen employees and very complex. It was trying to actually not build a website from scratch, but to take an existing platform that the client had to move from and reproduce the functionality of that without any access to the back end, without the ability to dump the database tables. Anyway, I spent 20 months in this. It sucked up all the air of the room. I was to the point where I wasn't making. I think at the end I ended up, when you average out the bid price, I was working for like 125 bucks a month for 20 months. It was really,
Wow.
and at one point I finally just had to say to myself, it's time to pull the plug. But I was telling myself, well, I will fail. I gave my word, and I want to support this. This is a black man running a business, and I want to support a brother. And it's like, yeah, Cornell, you're in over your head. You cannot do this. You're never going to finish this. And how long are you going to give your skills away for free? And it was one of the toughest conversations because I was like, I felt like a personal failure. I felt like a professional failure. I felt like it was going to be a ding to my reputation. Here's the punchline though. Now some of the projects I am working on and the things I have to do for them, I'm like, wait a minute. I so know how to implement this thing because Was that a failure, or was it a path to discovery for processes now that are like second nature to me? Because I did and developed all this stuff. I never fully implemented it, but I learned probably 60% more than I knew about the platform that I developed on, which is WordPress. And so now I'm implementing things like, oh, wait a minute, I know how to take this, I know how to integrate these things, I know how to do that because I did that. I slogged through that for 20 months. So did I make money off of that? No. Was I waking up miserable and full of agita every day? Yes, of course I was. But once I got over the trauma of that, and it's interesting that you worked with a trauma-based organization. I'd like you to say a little more about that and the significance of that. But now the takeaway for me is that I am a much better developer. I know what I know. I know what I don't know. I know my lane and to stay in it. And I know how to bring maximum value to the clients and how to take on the appropriate work to make sure that I can deliver the results, both for them and what triggered this was the joy. I'm enjoying what I do again. And I was not, I was miserable, especially the last half a year. I woke up every morning. I'm surprised I didn't develop an ulcer. It was really absolutely miserable for me. So hearing you drop the word joy, I think that's something that's very important, especially for burgeoning entrepreneurs. If we lose that sense of joy, we could literally kill ourselves from the stress.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a really important role that sort of anxiety, depression, burnout plays in our overall, sense of well-being, our peace of mind. And I was like kind of thrown aback to really learn what that means and what it's so different than the stigma we think it is. So trauma is really referring to how our nervous system becomes hijacked with the chemicals that are flooded through our system when we are in fight, flight, or freeze mode, right?
Right,
Someone has cornered us, someone's getting too close, we feel threatened, or someone is threatening, right? Not just we randomly are
right.
feeling. So when it comes to our acknowledging, oh, I feel failure,
Yes,
it's very important to know if we do have not only wounds, but if there's trauma there, right? Trauma doesn't mean you're a softie, you don't have any strong backbone, or you're not a leader. It's just, it does take a real leader to acknowledge vulnerability and where the wounds are and where the wisdom is. And that
right,
just is what it is. And no one has to know your own private and secret process or practice. No one has to know you're admitting, man, I
right,
would have done that one different. I mean, if
right.
you want to not only build bridges, but if you want to develop significant and meaningful relationships, now that's another story
Right.
because failing with others, including your collaborative partners, is next level. That's
Yes.
also difficult to master it with ourselves, but difficult to master. I'm good at this thing, but why is this,
Right.
collaboration?
Right. Why is the whole not greater than the sum of the parts?
Yes, exactly. And that can be really a head scratcher. So,
Yes. Well, I really, I'd like to thank you so much. And this is why I love these conversations. I say it every time, so listeners, I'm going to say it again. I get so much out of these conversations that if nobody ever listens to these podcasts, it's like every one of these like a mini course, a mini, a workshop for me. And pointing out the fact that trauma has a physiological, a neurochemical effect. We tend to think of trauma, especially, put it out there, we men tend to think of I'm just because the square jawed, stiff upper lip, walk it off, be a man, and it's like meanwhile we are literally we're falling apart inside. We're the cortisol and all of these anxiety stressors that are it's physical. It's not just a mental thing. Change your mind. Drink a beer. Whatever.
that's right.
No, I'm doing physiological damage to myself if I don't properly manage the trauma that I'm putting. And this is what was happening with that contract that I told you. I had to save myself. That's why I realized, like Cornell, you're killing yourself. You're not going to survive this. This is not going to work. It's never going to work. You're making yourself crazy. The alarm would go off, and I would face it with a sense of dread. Why am I waking up and facing each new day with a sense of dread, of fear and loathing? And I was like, what's more important? I'm not making any money off of this. It's sucking up so much air. I'm not taking on any new business. I'm not keeping my pipeline full. So I am literally running every aspect of my life into the ground. My personal joy is gone. My emotional state is devastated. My professional state is running into the ground, falling behind. And I just had to realize. And the best thing that I did was to acknowledge failure and just to say to this client, look, I have failed. I am not the guy to do it. I am never going to be able to complete this for you. You know, I wish you success, and according to our contracts, that's why I write the contracts that I sign. And basically, it's like what you get according to the contract is that you get everything that I've done. I'll give you access to everything you need, and we walk away. You know, and that's it. And suddenly the sun was shining again. It took a few
Yes.
months to be able to just walk the neighborhood without this burden, like almost like a physical burden on my shoulders, to be able to stand up straight and take a breath and to take a walk and step away from my workstation and not feel guilty, like, why did I release the shackles off of my ankle? Aren't I supposed to be here, ramming speed in the galley boat, pulling the oars? So
Yeah, I mean, I love that. And I feel like what that really kind of brings to mind is that when we reflect, maybe a part of what we discover in this type of scenario, which I'm sure, every accidental entrepreneur has experienced,
yeah.
that the failure then is traveling beyond what we're able to deliver and not flagging something that is beyond our scope of agreement. So that to me is also, we always think of failure as the inability to continue moving forward, but sometimes failure is the insistence on moving forward without kind of folding in that emotional intelligence and reflecting on really what's the big picture here. It's not
Right.
just to do a good job, but it's also to really get this project across the finish line in a way that we're really celebrating, right? I
Right.
don't believe in barely finish lines. Like you finish, I'm like, no, the joy part, the fun part, the part that we, raise a toast to.
Yes, yes, yes. I love that don't believe in barely finish lines. That's another takeaway line for me. I love that. And it's interesting that you have an athletic background, and obviously, sports metaphors are very effective. People can get. That's why I always love the statement. You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. You lose 100% of the races where you don't get out of the starting block. You know.
Well, I do love, I love the references to sports. So in high school, I was a field hockey player. Yes,
Oh.
I'm a whole adult still talking about my experience on my high school field hockey team because it was so amazing. Rest in peace to my coach Shore. Coach Eileen Shore was an incredible coach. And I learned a lot about failing when on that field hockey team. So I do like the sports angle, but interestingly, beyond those little, they're almost like little business affirmations, those little sayings, those motivational, quotes to keep us going. But I also believe that those are very well paired, especially with what is your phrase? Accidental entrepreneurs.
Yes, yes, yes.
That yes, those phrases are great to keep it going, but it's also important to pair that with um those longer processes that can't just be said in one cool phrase. I met a lot of accidental entrepreneurs along the way. And if it's not a catchphrase, if it's not something, if it's not a concept that they can fit into one of those catchy, quick phrases, they're almost sort of giving it a secondary priority.
Ah,
And
okay.
interestingly, where strategy lives, the way that I am working with, niche subject matter experts, is that we have the quick, short perspectives because those help us understand the big picture.
Right.
But it's really important to unpack the things that need to be unpacked. If we are oversimplifying things that need to be kind of processed out and explained, I believe we do ourselves a disservice, one that we will eventually and ultimately feel in our businesses.
Yes, yes, definitely. And I definitely find in the tech world, there's a tendency to get caught up into what I call buzzword bingo. Everybody knows the acronym of the day, the little catchphrase. I mean, the thing now is generative AI, 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 AI. You know, and it's like, do you really even know the business case for this? Do you know what you do with it? Or do you see, 15, Facebook ads telling you that AI is the latest and greatest and the thing that's going to come? And it's like if you don't understand, I like the distinction you have is that some things can't be summed up in a catchphrase, a buzzword, or a clever acronym. Some things take the time to explore the depth because they're deeper concepts, they're deeper aspects, they're deeper processes.
Absolutely. And again, when we have that balance of joy, we have that balance of, not being too hard on ourselves as accidental entrepreneurs or being hard on ourselves appropriately, using that to kind of get to that next stage of wisdom. So, there's different angles, but they all should still be leading us to joy and wisdom along the way.
Okay, and joy and wisdom. I like that you constantly come back to that because in the business world, in the Wharton Harvard Business School, sort of thing, there's just this drive on bottom line and quarterly returns and dividends and shareholders' interest, as if that is the sum and substance, the focus of business. And I think you could go through 4 years of, or however long business school is, I think 2 or 3 years, whatever. You can get an MBA. And how often are you going to hear someone talking about joy?
Yeah. And honestly, when we think about reasons accidental entrepreneurs do not want to be an employee any longer is because being an employee can limit our creativity, right? If we don't have other professionals that are considered higher up on the hierarchy, we most likely will not grow in those organizations. And this impacts different people depending on your cultural background, your national origin. So we all know what we know about
Yes.
the system and structure that we are living in the society. It's very patriarchal. It's
Yes.
also, dominant caste supremacy culture is really
Yes.
embedded in our business practices. And I'm
Yes.
only saying this not because we're necessarily unpacking that, but for those accidental entrepreneurs that are, excuse me, I have all the frogs in my throat this morning.
Ribbit.
But yes, rivet, rivet. But those accidental entrepreneurs that keep taking advice from dominant caste supremacy culture benefactors, we are often going to keep being hard on ourselves because we're not really identifying, hey, that business leader may have a point, but they're not giving me the perspective as I'll use myself as an example, as a Black African American woman
Yes.
in this particular society. That is not about thinking more positive. That's
Yes.
actually more to, people who are, for example, customarily paid less, such as women or
Yes.
LGBTQIA,
Yes.
on that hierarchy system. That then means, we kind of just have to keep those things in mind if we are expecting accidental entrepreneurs of the diaspora
Yes.
to, feel good. And it doesn't mean everyone, right? We're not a monolith. So someone might say, I'm from Southeast Asia, I'm from Kenya, I'm from Tennessee, been here
Right.
forever and I don't have these issues. Then great, that doesn't relate to those
Right.
people that say they don't have issues, but the fact of the matter is an entire culture has been hit. And no matter
Right.
how optimistic I am as a woman, if I submit for a job and someone else submits for a job, they may go in five, $10,000 more
Right.
on the salary than me, whether I know that or not, right? So it's
Exactly.
not just that acknowledgement. So when we do think about accidental entrepreneurs, and it's almost like not just how to not fail, but really looking at how to process. What should I be looking at? What do other people with my national origin or in my heritage, what have they learned about doing business in this system?
Right. Right.
That's really the key. And to have the process be specific. I'm going to take a lot of value from people of European American background who are business gurus. I'm
Right.
going to learn a lot from those
Right.
folks.
Of course.
But it doesn't mean that it's exclusively going to help me answer questions when I encounter barriers barriers to getting funding, right? Barriers to certain clients that say, well, you'd be legit if you had a partner that looked like us.
Right.
But since
Right.
it's just you, we're not sure. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
And,
all of it's wisdom. Just we got to stay aware that it's not one size fits all.
yes, and it's fascinating when you talk about I like how you phrase it, dominant culture and
Dominant caste. Yes,
dominant
dominant
caste
caste, supremacy culture.
supremacy, dominant caste supremacy culture, and that stands out to me because, and I want the listeners to understand, we're not talking about as reductionist as white versus black, or a sort of thing, because in terms of failure, part of what happens in the dominant caste is that they don't even realize that's the paradigm that they're operating in, whether it's the male female dichotomy or the black white dichotomy or the English as first language dichotomy, whatever it is. And I was having a discussion with a very good friend of mine that I speak with several times a week, and we sort of fellowship together. And this is the number one in my brain trust, if you will.
Right.
And I was talking because I'm a member of a men's group in Facebook, and I'm 63, and this is for men over 50 who are looking to get back into shape rather than looking like we're in our third trimester, and but it's also about getting away from the toxic masculine paradigm. So the founder of this, Clark Bartram, who's been a fitness model since he was in his 20s, and he just turned 60 last year, he adopted the phrase maximized men, which is men who are not afraid of exposing their vulnerability, of reaching out for support, of acknowledging, that there's a 50% of the world that's not men. Imagine that, And I was talking with this friend of mine, and I was just I was had at an event, and I was talking with some men, and inside the Facebook group for this men's group, and just sharing that it is a safe space for us as men to talk about the things that normally, especially if you're with the gym bros and the musclehead rack rats, you're not going to talk about your feelings, your fear of failure, and things of this nature. And then it occurred to me, it's like, who really need, because it's almost kind of, first of all, it's one of those overwrought phrases, safe space. It's almost hackneyed at this point. And
Right.
secondly, that's not a term you're going to hear a bunch of exclusively male groups throwing up in the conversation. But it occurred to me, it's like, who needs safe spaces more than anything else, than anyone else? It's men. Because men not having safe spaces is why everyone else needs safe spaces. Because they need safe spaces from the men who don't have them, and that's why they're acting out with everything from microaggressions to macroaggressions to just all of the toxic, dysfunctional behavior, because they're not processing their humanity, because there's no safe space culturally for them to do that, to admit that they're scared, to admit that they're uncertain, to admit that they have emotions, for crying out loud, that they're sometimes it's just too much, that maybe they want to take a break, they maybe want to tap out, but no, you just square shoulders, stiff upper lip, suck it up, suck it up, walk it off. And until we as men can collectively come together with men and say, bros, that's BS. Okay, F that. Let's, from A to F to B, this is the F.
Yes, absolutely. And, I'm really glad that you are, the perspective you just shared really kind of helps the accidental entrepreneur understand if you're judging yourself for failure and you kind of can't even think clearly, you can't think creatively unless you're in a space that lacks the judgment and that has the support systems. We can really call it whatever we want. Like you said,
Yeah.
some of these phrases we've used to death, and people are, the meaning kind of takes on something of its own that's a little bit more about a trend than it
Yeah.
is the long-term need for us to have spaces where we are cared for, we are guided, and that we are supported in being at our full potential, but minus the punitive kind of function. So we can just kind
Yes.
of show up and say, oh, well, hey, let's challenge that thought, right?
Right. Right.
I don't feel like, and and being hard on ourselves can get us far. So I'm not going to spin the storyline that,
Yeah.
oh, if you're hard on yourself, you're never going to make it, which sometimes that's what we tell kids.
Yeah.
You're never going to get there. But the reality is you can get there. And when you do, you might not even identify when it's time to celebrate, when it's time to acknowledge your efforts, when it's
Oh,
time to acknowledge what worked. And
wow.
therefore, you're still
Wow.
building more joy, right? And joy lives in not only your business, not only in your personal life, because business is going well. We feel accomplished, we feel relaxed. Maybe
Right.
we're allowed to go get that extra fancy dinner that we want to get with our loved one. But it's also something that it's there for larger reasons.
Okay.
And I think that that is a big part of the accidental entrepreneur. A normal American business is like business isn't personal. Ha, I say. Business is very personal. And in fact,
Yes.
a lot of professionals are purpose driven. So it's interesting how we can look at failure. We're just like, hey, it's just business, or we're purpose driven. It's still, failure can still do a sophisticated, tailored dance on our nerves
Yes.
if we are not kind of acknowledging, ooh, that's exhausting me, or that's burning me out, or that's stressing me out. And
Yes.
if there is failure in it, is it the business structure? Is it the partnership? Is it that we're not adjusting timelines to, accommodate for changes? So all those things are, you can't
Yes.
perfectly do them, but
Right.
those are things to kind of be front and center when the accidental entrepreneur is reaching its full potential or
Yes.
reaching their
Yes.
full potential.
And as I'm listening to you, I'm reflecting that one of the things that for the dominant caste, say it again, the dominant caste.
Yeah, so and I'm gonna mention a book here. So dominant caste supremacy culture.
Okay.
This is a phrase that comes from the book Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson.
Okay. Okay.
So this is her second book. She is an incredibly well-researched writer, and the book it's like a huge mega lift on your brain. So I'm
Right.
not gonna say
Right.
it's a
No, it's
casual
not.
baby
Yeah, it's,
book.
it's not an airport book that you're going to read on the flight between New York and Chicago, and Chicago or San Francisco. But
It, it
what stands out to me is that we, particularly, and I always think of things being a man. I think of things in terms of what we need to create that safe space for men to get out of the toxic culture. Is we need to be able to, and as you're assessing, looking at your business, looking at how it works, assessing performance, is we need to find a way of facing challenge without conflict. Because when you confront the dominant caste supremacy culture, the tendency is that they react as if there's conflict there. And no, I'm challenging established norms that maybe need to be rethought, paradigms that need to be restructured. I'm not challenging you as a person. Like when you speak of, say, for example, an endemic racism, which still exists in American society. And then you'll get the second generation European who will say, well, my parents never owned slaves. It's like, yeah, but you're part of the paradigm. And first of all, I'm not accusing you of anything. So I'm not looking for an apology from you. I'm looking for you to stop pretending that you don't see what is there so that we can restructure it.
Absolutely. And to be honest, I don't think that it's sometimes we want to just have a business. Whatever
Yeah.
all those social things are out there, that's out there. Right. But the reality
Yes,
is,
yes.
if you have the opportunity to, if you have the luxury to think that way, that means you're a benefactor. Like, oh, business is business. I'm fine. So, dominant caste, that's a global phrase. Dominant caste means anyone that has that superiority
Right.
over
Right.
another body of people. And it's very important for
Right.
people of the global majority, that's PGM, that's us, for us to recognize how dominant caste supremacy culture plays a role not only in our entrepreneurial businesses, but in the global framework of how we connect with other cultures and other people with different, national origins.
Yes.
What does this mean? It means that if I'm not sensitive to, someone coming in, or they're not sensitive to me, right? Like, let's say there is someone coming in who has just experienced like American detainment for whatever reason, and now
Oof.
everything's okay. But in our business dealings,
Yeah.
sure, would it be helpful for me to understand, well, what does a person go through when they go through that, and just be sensitized to it? Doesn't mean to come at them thinking you're going to special healing gloves. I'm going to heal you now because I'm being aware.
Like
Look,
one of the X-Men or something, you'll have these
yeah,
special.
it's like we don't want to save the day X-Men, but just being, aware of how that functions means, for example, a benefit that a male-owned business may have when collaborating with a woman-owned business is that the woman-owned business may have some other things that have happened
Yes,
because she is identified as a woman.
yes, yes,
So I think, we have to really make sure these nuances, these are like next level nuances. Like, yes,
yes,
you want to get your business and just start and have these kind of things, but if it's important to your business, you want to have things like that
yes,
in your mission and vision statement so that everyone knows this is who you are, this is what you're about. And
yes.
when you fail, it is going to be backed by your mission and vision.
Right. And here's a nuance that just struck me in listening to this conversation. In the context of the United States of America, I could look at myself as very much not in the dominant caste. But I've been to France twice, and the second time I went with a group of representatives of not-for-profits to speak at a 2-day lecture series on entrepreneurship and empowerment. I don't speak very much French at all. Bonjour, ça va, comment ça va, qu'est-ce que c'est, à bientôt, où est le WC?
Right.
You know, here's the thing. I spent weeks in France and I didn't have to speak French because I am an English speaking person. And so I can travel in most of the world and I don't have to speak their language because they speak mine. And I can go anywhere I want, I can get any service, and I don't even have to attempt to speak French. So that just made me aware. It was like, wow, in the context of the world, as an American, I'm in the dominant caste.
Well, absolutely. The gift, and I believe that there's actually a wheel. I don't have that in front of me, so I can't share it with your audiences, but there's an entire wheel of where our privileges are based on our
Right,
identity, based on our socioeconomic stuff. But the idea there that you just shared, just to clarify, is that, the idea is that your people are not benefiting from the superiority that came and
right,
obliterated indigenous cultures and enslaved
right,
cultures. So,
right,
and again, the ultimate goal here is people can do their homework or not. People can have excuses on why I shouldn't complain that I get paid less in average
right,
society
right.
because I have a chance to have my own business. This is the beauty about being an accidental entrepreneur. You can be intentional about, I'd like to build with this type of person.
Right.
I'd like to build with a person that also acknowledges audiences who may have these experiences. And we want to be very good to our customers, but we want to be very good to our clients and also ourselves.
Yes,
So it's multifaceted and
yes.
ultimately people who really have the credit, like for example, who would be writing the reparations check? It's not you. So that's great that you are acknowledging your best behavior globally. I think that any good
Right.
global citizen does that. But it's also that the acknowledge of dominant caste supremacy culture is really acknowledging the facts, as Wilkerson outlines in her book. And I'm literally like three-quarters of the way through, and my mind was blown. I'm not going to fib here. So if that's important to folks' businesses, get ready for a deep dive. Um, and I did just want to mention, since we were kind of mentioned two books. So the other book I'm going to mention, just in case I forget, this is a book that is called Joyfully Just. It's called Black Wisdom and Buddhist Insights for Liberated Living. So, I'm not posing any specific spiritual structure. A lot of her
Right.
comments are interfaith,
Right.
but what I really love about this is she talks about a joy practice.
Ah.
And she's got
Ah.
this, cultural perspective. So for those of you who are accidental entrepreneurs and you need a joy practice, like getting these papers are giving you a headache, new to me. I can't believe I'm a complete grown up and I'm like, I need a joy practice, which really means
Yes.
I have to learn what gives me joy and I have to practice that. every day.
Yes, yes. That I thank you for constantly bringing it back to that. I think that's something so important, and this is kind of new in this conversation in the context of both failure and entrepreneurship. Is that sense of joy? I think that's really. And speaking of books, I'm working on my second book, which is
Ooh.
entitled "Born Again Capitalist," and the subtitle is, run a for-profit business without sacrificing your soul. And I myself, personally, I'm an agnostic. I'm the son of an ordained Baptist evangelist. My mother was, and she had a mission inside prisons to help, incarcerated moms, prepare to come back into the world and repatriate themselves and restore their relationships with their families, especially incarcerated mothers. But when I first came up with the idea, obviously I'm flipping the phrase born again Christian. I myself I don't consider myself in anything. I don't disparage any religion. I respect them all. And when I was first conceiving of the book, I thought to step away from, well, I should say maybe in the preface, this is not a religious book. And it's like, well, no. If you're religious, fine, this is for you. If you're not religious, fine, this is for you. If you're an agnostic like me, fine, this is for you, because we speak in religious metaphors. We speak in lots of metaphors. Earlier in this conversation, we were talking about sports metaphors, you know? And I mean, everything from bless you, saints preserve us, hell in a handbasket, Odin's beard, by Jove. So religious metaphors are in every culture, in every lexicon. And so I'm leveraging them. I'm also intentionally tweaking it a little bit. But what I'm hearing is this joy aspect, because I was just in terms of I've worked workshops for almost a decade now with aspiring and accidental entrepreneurs, and something I hear people say, which constantly confounds me, is, oh well, I'm not in it for the money. Well, then you need to get a job, because business is about running an operation at a profit. That's now why you do it and how you do it are different. But the most reductionist definition of a business is to run an enterprise and operate at a profit. But there's this stigma that money is dirty, it sullies the soul, it makes me materialistic, and none of that has to be true. Money is just a tool. Like I say, with a hammer, I can build a wall or I can smash a window. The hammer didn't do it. It's my hand and my intention that wields the hammer. Money can be a toy, as we see in so many celebrities that spend their money faster than they make it. Flex and flash and fling and bling, and look at my fancy car and the booze I'm drinking and the watch I'm wearing, whatever. Or money can be a tool. And I see entrepreneurship as an agent of change, as empowerment, so we can create the lives and destinies, that the lives and legacies that we desire and deserve. Because I like to use phraseology. I say you got to clock them dollars if you want to make real change. And
Mhm.
that to me is the aspect of entrepreneurship. That's why I'm talking to entrepreneurs. That's why I'm looking to destigmatize failure. And that's why I love you bringing in that sense. Because if we don't have a sense of joy, and I constantly harken back to a few years ago, Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade, two well-known celebrities, world famous, as successful in any way, young, beautiful, healthy, strong, successful, rich, white, and they both killed themselves.
Mm.
So just the stuff, just the stature and the status and the stacks of paper, that's not what we're talking about when we talk about entrepreneurial success. Because to me, just as failure is an opportunity to assess your performance, money is just a measure of the value that you're exchanging. It's not the prize, because money, after all, is just a cipher of energy. I was teaching a web development class in like 2017 at City College in New York, and we were talking about e-commerce. At one point, I took a $20 bill out of my pocket. That's back when I used to walk around with cash money. And I held it up and I said, how much is this worth? And of course, most of the class said $20. I was like, no, actually, it's worth nothing. Sitting on this desk here, it's just paper. Until I exchange it with someone who gives me $20 worth of value to me, it has no value. And then when it's in their cash register, again, it has no value until they exchange it. Money is like a blood cell. It's only in circulation that it has any value. If I gave you a stack at, 10,000 $100 bills and dropped you on a deserted island, what do you have? Do you have
Well,
anything of value?
sure. And what I would add to that, I would, yeah, I would add a yes and. So, yes, and once people understand that basic synopsis, you also want to understand how the system that we're in does often erase culture from business
Ooh,
practices. So, not only are we in an exchange of that currency that you're speaking about, but the way that I work with my clients in any case is that there is a currency that means this is an exchange of energy. This is an exchange
yes,
of respect. This
yes,
is a high level collaboration where we are centering the goals, but your full potential.
yes.
And oftentimes I know the difference. If I'm looking to collaborate with people, they say, oh, yeah, we'll do this. Oh, well, I'm going to just change it. And it's like that kind of like hardcore old school business where it's like, I'm not going to negotiate. I'm going to be tough. I'm going to be passive aggressive. I'm not going to. You can do whatever you want. This is why I love being an entrepreneur. But the fact of the matter is, not with everyone. And so the
Right.
gift of being able to be an accidental entrepreneur, eventually an intentional entrepreneur and a successful entrepreneur,
Yes.
is that we get to really discern who it is we see ourselves growing with. Where is the need? Who are our highest paying clients? Or what is our target? What are we selling and how? And what do we want as a response? But if we are a culture focused business focused on other professionals that really don't value culture,
Mm.
that means that they wouldn't mind breaking bread with me. They wouldn't mind doing business with me, but they will only
Right.
break bread with each other.
Right.
Like,
Right.
oh, you're not us, but like, we'll give you a little, here's a little something. We kind
Yes.
of like you, but you're not us, and you don't get to hang out with us. You don't get to grow with us. So the
Right.
final bit I would say to accidental entrepreneurs is that think to yourself, aside from what the currency is, the monetary part of the currency, the energetic part of the
Yes.
currency, but really, when you reflect on the people that you're meeting, the people you're collaborating with, your partners, can you grow with them?
Mm.
Can you grow with them? If you cannot grow with them, but it feels really cool right now, that means that you're going to hit your glass ceiling really quick.
Right.
So
Right.
where are we going from here? And this is especially important for those clients that come along that might be meticulous or like geniusly creative in tiny, tiny, tiny details when you've agreed on kind of a much bigger picture that's going to take some broader strokes.
Right. Right.
So you can normally pick it up if this person is, why are they doing all those things? This is really slowing us down. Oh, they don't have
Right.
an agenda on if we grow or not.
Right.
That tells
Right.
you everything you need to know about, why you're collaborating and what you expect to get
Right.
and how to move on with the wisdom once you wrap that up.
Right. Well, you point out a very fine distinction. I like to say that sales is the exchange of value between two or more human beings. Part of that we can measure in terms of money, cash, coin, or currency. But one of the things that you just pointed out and summed up quite nicely is that a significant part of the value that's exchanged in any business transaction is the interpersonal, the cultural, the social exchange. It's not just the bottom line, what's reflected in my bank balance. And we have to weigh that factor. I can get a lot of money, but if I'm not getting culturally enriched, or if my culture is being devalued, how much have I really profited from this exchange? And especially if I'm looking as an ongoing connection or in the long run.
Absolutely. And the beauty about being your own boss is that you can change your mind anytime you like. So you
Yes,
are not limited to A/B tests. You can A, B, C, D, E, all the way through that alphabet.
yes.
And
And
it is
sometimes
that
go from A to
fun.
F to B. I love that.
Yeah, I love the A to F to B. It's A to F to B. Um, and just our ability to n- habitualize the healthy cycle of making mistakes or making
Mm,
choices that we don't feel are great for the next step.
right,
Sometimes we discover it wasn't a mistake after all, it was just a choice.
right, right. Okay. I like that.
So,
I like that. Yes. Well, obviously we could go on, and something that didn't really happen in the season one, the episodes I recorded from 2019 to 2020. We're definitely going to have another conversation because we're just scratching the surface here. I thank you so much for joining me and joining our viewers and listeners here in the podcast world. So as we sum up, do you have any parting thoughts or parting words you'd like to leave our listeners and viewers with as we wrap things up?
Yes, thank you so much for listening. And also take care of yourself, take care of your ideas, protect your ideas, and take time to rest and create space. Definitely visit, the Acosta Institute to learn more about Dr. Angel's work. And also, you can visit me at Kissing Lions Public Relations, kissinglions.com, and follow me on LinkedIn.
Okay, very good, very good. And okay, folks, I'm going to put the books that Kashana recommended, and I'm going to put the links to her in the show notes for this episode when it's published. And once again, Kashana, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for this wonderful conversation. We're definitely going to have to book another one because there's so much that we could discuss. And to you out there in podcast land, I'd just like to remind you, using that sports metaphor, that life is not a competition. Life is a race that you only run with yourself, and the only comparison or competition is with the person you were the day before. Remember, never give up. Keep running. And I'll see you guys next episode. Peace.
Thank you.